then I think this is being driven by an ideology because it is not being driven by reason. And so people who were nervous about sex for whatever reason would say, oh, abortion's wrong. That was turned into a power play by powerful people, often powerful men, basically telling women what they could and couldn't do. It always astonishes me that the same people are vitriolically opposed to abortion and vitriolically in favor of everybody carrying guns and being prepared to shoot people at any time.
In a shocking conversation between N.T. Wright and Carey Nieuwhof, we hear that a Christian cannot be pro-Second Amendment and pro-life without being a hypocrite. Now, I would argue that line of reasoning is oddly left-wing, and what is causing the Christian church among big Eva personalities, megachurch pastors, and leading Christian thinkers to take on left-wing positions.
God is trans. God is gender non-binary.
When you hear David Platt talking about the problems of his white privilege.
As a white pastor, I need to grow.
And then you hear Matt Chandler suggesting that DEI hiring is somehow redemptive.
If we find an Anglo 8 and an African-American 7, which one do you want? I said, I want the African-American 7.
It makes you wonder what is going on with the Christian church. We'll talk about it today on Indie Thinker. Welcome to the show. My name is Reed Huberman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, on Indie Thinker, I like to try to show how Christian thinking can provide something beneficial to our culture, and sometimes like to show how Christian thinking is not in defiance of reason. Now, today I'm going to talk about the left-wing ideological shift, the progressive shift that's happening in churches. Before I do that, I want to make sure that you know that our show today is sponsored by CMG Home Loans. If you're looking to refinance or purchase a new home, you need to check out our friends. So go to cmghomeloans.com, or you can go to the description of this podcast where you'll see that link. Check them out today and let them know that Indie Thinker sent you. Now, I think we can all agree something happened in 2020 that fundamentally changed our world. 4 years later, I think I finally realized what it is. I'll save my very real verified conspiracy theory, but one of the things is that we are watching revolutionary forces who want to destroy America, not only because it's capitalistic and democratic, but primarily because it is Christian. Now, I want to save you a little bit of a mini rant there, and I'll just push aside most of the justification for that and just say, even if I'm wrong about a secular conspiracy clearly spelled out by every communist thinker in the world, there is one thing that I hope we can all agree with. Crisis reveals what's really inside of us. Like in the never-ending story, crisis puts us face to face with ourselves, and often when we take a look in the mirror, we don't like what we see.
Confronted with their true selves, most men run away screaming.
I think this is at least true of the Christian church. When we went through the pandemic, we saw pastors exposed, like Andy Stanley, Rick Warren, David Platt, Tim Keller, John Piper, Matt Chandler, J.D. Greer, and many other individuals. We saw them in the face of that pressure. What it pushed out of them was that they couldn't really handle Christianity when it comes to cultural issues from a philosophical standpoint. Today, I think we have evidence of that again, in a conversation with Carey Nieuwhof and one of the most touted intellectuals of the Christian faith, N.T. Wright. Check it out.
But here's the thing. You're exactly right. In the same way that our world is polarized, Christianity these days, particularly in America, in the West, seems to be polarized between a theocracy, like here's the governor we need to elect, here's the president, here's the Supreme Court, here are the decisions we need, like almost teetering on theocracy. And head in the sand, this world is all disappearing. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. We're not going to get involved in politics because this is passing away. And one day we'll all be in heaven. Kind of denialism, you know, if you want to look at it that way. I'd love for you to comment on both views and what you think of both views. And then maybe let's get into the alternative that you spend a lot of time in your book talking about.
This is a whole seminar in itself. But one of the ironies is that the two positions which you said, which do appear polarized, actually seem to feed off one another, so that fundamentalist dispensationalists who believe that we're going to be raptured and end up in heaven are often some of the same people who are campaigning very hard on a right-wing political ticket.
Actually,
it's
that's
as
true.
though out of that, they just think, oh, well, here is one issue which the world seems to be getting totally wrong, and it really worries and disturbs us, therefore we're going to campaign on that, even if that's illogical in terms of the this world is not my home.
Which is why you sometimes get environmental comments like it doesn't matter what we do to the earth because
Exactly.
it's all going down anyway, and yet we need to elect X to this office.
Exactly, I know that. And actually, when I was living in Canada, which is 35, 40 years ago now, this was the first time I really met that. When I was doing, you'll be interested in this, I was doing a series of talks for a church in Thunder Bay, Ontario, up at the northwest corner of Lake Superior.
Been there once.
And I was supposed to be talking about Jesus in his historical context. Most of the questions were about ecology because the good people in this church were being bombarded by their American friends who were saying, don't give us all this nonsense about acid rain and so on because God is going to burn up the whole world soon. So why should you worry? The important thing is that we're on the right side, etc. when that happens. And they were saying, we know that's wrong, but how can we argue against it? And I'd never really met that before. So it goes quite deep with me. Been reflecting on it for all that time.
It must have been the late 80s. I remember acid rain being so big.
Now, I think this is a perfect time to talk about straw manning real quick. Straw manning is the act of creating an argument that your opponent isn't making or misrepresenting the argument as a whole, typically because you actually don't know enough about the thing to steel man or to really give the argument in its fullest fashion. So you make the weakest version of the argument so that you can easily attack it. It's either because, like I suggest, that you don't really know it well enough, or you're just being dishonest. In any case, what we just heard is a straw man, and you will hear it throughout this conversation, which I think is really interesting because genuinely, I think Carey Nieuwhof and N.T. Wright are intelligent guys. But make no mistake, you just heard a straw man about climate change. I mean, they even slowly, even accidentally almost, jumped into a conversation about acid rain and how it all of a sudden has disappeared. You know, when I was a kid, I heard about acid rain all the time. It's going to fall from the sky. It's going to rip your face off. Smoke is going to come from your rotting corpse as the acid rain just comes pouring down on you because it's going to be such a horrible thing. Now, we don't hear about that anymore. You know what else we don't hear about anymore? We don't hear about global warming. Instead, it's been changed to the amalgamous climate change because climate change can be whatever you want it to be. And then you can suggest the climatist kind of version of reality that whenever something happens, climate change. Like when it gets warmer during the summer, obviously climate change. When we see a hurricane, climate change. And if you don't do something about it, in 30 years, we're all dead. Now, N.T. Wright and Nieuwhof suggest that the only reason that a Christian might have any doubts about what we hear, or maybe any reservations about jumping in front of traffic with the other climate activists, is simply because you are so beholden to this kind of goofy Christianity, that you are so heavenly minded you're no earthly good. Now, for my part, I would take more heavenly minded people because heavenly minded people actually were the ones who changed the world. I would argue that throughout history, we consistently see people who have an apprehension of God's word as opposed to the truth we're being told. And those who have an apprehension of God's word typically change the world as we know it. You know, people like Martin Luther, Tyndale, and so many others. So I would argue that it isn't necessarily because we have a bunch of spiritually minded people that don't care about the earth that we are resistant to climate change ideas, but simply because we have been lied to constantly by climate change activists, by climatists out there who have told us for the last 50 years that the world is going to end tomorrow. Now, if these guys were TBN preachers and doing this, you can rest assured that they would get the jeering and the mocking of militant atheists everywhere for saying that the earth is going to end. But yet we are still hosted to listening to Paul Ehrlich after basically everything he said about the climate is totally 100% wrong. And everything that, more importantly, he said about population growth is totally wrong. So let me just give you a brief overview of just a couple of ways in which we have been lied to about civilization, overpopulation, natural resources, and climate change. So, for instance, Harvard biologist George Wald estimated that civilization will end within 15 or 30 years unless immediate action is taken against the problems facing mankind. And I bet you couldn't guess that was prophesied in 1985. So by the year 2000, catastrophic whatever. Y2K wasn't as publicized for those of you who weren't around then. How about this? Population will inevitably end, completely outstrip whatever small increase in food supplies we make. Of course, that's the aforementioned Paul Ehrlich, who declared that in 1970. He said this too, that the death rate will increase until at least 100 to 200 million people per year will be starving to death during the next 10 years. And of course, the exact opposite is true of this, that we've actually been alleviating world hunger at rapid rates. How about Peter Gunter, a North Texas University professor who wrote in 1970, demographers agree almost unanimously on the following grim timetable. By 1975, widespread famines will begin in India. These will spread by 1990 to include all of India, Pakistan, China, and the Near East Africa. By the year 2000, or conceivably sooner, South and Central America will exist under famine conditions. By the year 2000, 30 years from now, the entire world, with the exception of Western Europe, North America, and Australia, will all be in famine. And how about this one last thing? And this is my favorite. The Climactic Research Unit at Anglia University was the leading data gathering institute for global warming at the time. And in 2009, they were hacked and thousands of emails and documents were released to the public, which showed that the research institute had been lying about the data and manipulating it in favor of global warming for years. So I would posit to you that the reason that Christians should be and have a moral obligation to be a little bit more open-minded than to just simply listen to the mainstream narrative about climate change is because we care about the truth. And if you care about the truth, then you do not necessarily listen to what you are being told. Now, should Christians care about the environment? Absolutely. God created it, we should. But this is my problem. The suggestion that if you don't listen to the mainstream narrative, somehow you don't care about the environment at all and you don't care about the world is exactly the kind of straw man that you'll hear next when we talk about gun control and being pro-life. Check it out.
But I mean, take the abortion issue. It seems to me that abortion became an issue not least because people were aware, certainly in my country and I think in America, that abortion was being used as an easy, in inverted commas, form of contraception, and that in consequence was licensing sexual immorality, or what used to be thought of as sexual immorality, promiscuity anyway. And so that the desire to have free abortion went with the desire to have free sex. And so people who were nervous about sex for whatever reason, and there'd be many reasons why people would be nervous about sex, would say, oh, abortion's wrong, and then produce all the standard arguments about, well, here is a picture of a fetus in the womb, etc., etc. Whereas then, conversely, that was turned into a power play by powerful people, often powerful men, basically telling women what they could and couldn't do, which then you get two of the ideologies of our time, Aphrodite, the goddess of erotic love, Mars, the god of violence and war, who are kind of squabbling with each other. Is this about male violence? Is it about the right to have a fulfilled erotic existence, etc.? And we haven't named those issues, and in consequence, I think we're often shadowboxing. We're often, going by implication at this or that topic, and certainly the same would be true for things like the military adventurism that we've seen. which, there's some evil in the world, so let's go and drop bombs on it and then it'll all be all right, won't it? And, we've done that so often and we simply haven't learned. And when I see people doing things and they're not learning from their mistakes, which is one of the definitions of insanity, by the way, then I think this is being driven by an ideology because it is not being driven by reason. And there are all sorts of ideas. So I think until we name the ideologies, particularly name the idols that are being worshipped, then we're never going to be in a good place to steer our way through.
Now, you just heard a staggering straw man from N.T. Wright, even more stacked with straw than the one that you heard before about climate change. We'll get to the Second Amendment issue in just a moment, but I want to open the door to his thoughts on abortion here. And he suggests something that I think is okay, but then quickly falls off the cliff. He says that Christians, in particular Christian men, probably white evangelical Christian men, if I were to take a stab at the straw man here, that abortion became an issue with those men because they believed that it was being used as a way to promote promiscuity. Now, this is undeniable that this is exactly what it did become, but this wasn't the biggest issue. In fact, I would say Christians had a bigger issue with the fact that it was not just promoting promiscuity, but it was promoting irresponsibility with the repercussions of promiscuity, because abortion was being used as a contraceptive agent because it was so ubiquitous. So in other words, it was so common and so easy to access an abortion, you could go around having sex as much as you want, create as many babies as you want, but then you could just go off them if you needed to. And Christians had a little bit of a problem with that. But we are given from N.T. Wright that really all this is about is powerful men telling women what to do with their bodies. So it has nothing to do with the fact that babies are being killed. It's really just a bunch of insecure men that want to go around telling women what to do with their bodies. Now, this is crazy, honestly, because this is something I've only heard from the left. Like, my body, my choice is a leftist liturgical mantra, and it is stunning to hear it come from the mouth of N.T. Wright. The problem with my body, my choice is that, yes, it's your body, but there's also another body involved. So, for instance, let's just, I guess, posit the idea that the baby in your body is a boy. Now, I hate to be graphic with you, but if you are a female, which is the only kind of person that can get pregnant, sorry, and you have a boy inside of your belly, how is that boy your body? Now, I know this is mind-boggling to some people, but it's really clear. The body in your body is not your body. That's a human baby. It has separate DNA. And if you off that baby, it dies, but you don't, because it is not your body. Now, N.T. Wright suggests that the people who are really driven by ideology are Christian conservatives on the right. But here we have this guy basically regurgitating mindless leftist pap. So all I can tell you is just to come back to this simple idea, to show the rhetorical errors of N.T. Wright. It is wrong to take an innocent life. Abortion always takes an innocent life. Therefore, abortion is wrong. And Wright's inability to see this obvious fact is manifestly evident in his next conversation about gun ownership and abortion.
When I go to America, it always astonishes me that the same people are vitriolically opposed to abortion and vitriolically in favor of everybody carrying guns and being prepared to shoot people at any time. On the one hand, you'd have thought if they're so concerned about preserving human life, even in embryo and in vitro, etc., then why are they not concerned about preserving human life when it comes to, say, a school shooting by somebody who's been able to walk into a store, even though mentally disturbed, and buy a weapon-grade automatic rifle? I mean, for somebody from the other side of the Atlantic, and I suspect for you in Canada, this is just nonsense. But if you try to argue on one side or the other, people immediately assume that you'll go all the way down that line, that if you're right-wing, so-called, on this issue, you will be on all the other issues as well, or if you're left-wing, then etc. And I constantly want to say the issues do not bundle up like that, and to think in that oversimplified way, that simplistic way, is seriously dangerous. And I guess it's a modern version of a phenomenon which must have existed all along, that, my country right or wrong, or my prince right or wrong, whatever, that you make a decision as to who you're going to follow, and then whatever they tell you, you'll do it because you've made that decision. Instead of that, part of the maturity of wise, well-organized societies would be to be able to introduce lots of nuance and say, well, no, we've got to think this one through.
See, it's time to wag the finger, because you are just simply vitriolic and you're emotional when it comes to baby murder. Could you please just calm down a little bit? And then, of course, if you believe in protecting your family because you're a gun owner, well, it's just because you think you're Clint Eastwood, big guy, and you need to calm down and you need to grab your Bible.
Go ahead. Make my day.
So here's his idea, the biggest straw man of all, that you can't be pro-Second Amendment and you can't be pro-life. Now, let me just first suggest that I think his argument seems predicated upon the fallacy of more guns, more deaths, which is something that we hear from the left a lot, that the more guns there are, the more deaths there are, so we need to keep guns out of the hands of people. The reason this is ridiculous is that, statistically speaking, since 1973, gun ownership in America has remained almost exactly the same. So it can't be the fact that gun ownership is changing, and that's why violent crimes with guns are rising, and guns winding up in the hands of school shooters is becoming much more common. That is not why. I would argue that the reason that these kind of violent crimes, especially school shootings, are on the rise is because of the decline of Christianity. Now, here's what I'm not saying, that if you're not a Christian, you're ultimately going to grab a gun and go shoot up a school. Here's the argument, that secularism posits moral relativism. And when you do you, and you have your own truth, and you do that which is right in your own eyes, then you can make a more logical leap to kind of violent crime and school shootings than you can within the Christian worldview, which actually kind of frowns upon murder.
Think you gonna get away with it? Not up in here!
The idea that just because you're a gun owner, then you're advocating for the kind of senseless crimes that we're seeing in our society is ridiculous. But this doesn't even come close to coming out of N.T. Wright's mouth, that it may have more to do with the fact that we're living in a secular society more than anything, and that Christian virtue might actually help with this whole murder thing. Beyond that, you might even argue, well, Reed, you're totally neglecting mental health, and you're forgetting about people who have mental issues. And I'm not suggesting that all of a sudden we need to empty out all the insane asylums and bring them to church on Sunday. We got enough of our own. Thank you very much. And that would be the solution. I'm just simply saying this. Statistically speaking, Christians say that at least 1 in 3 of them say that they are very happy, compared to secularists who say 1 in 5 are very happy. So I'm just simply making the argument, the common sense one, I think, that more Christianity cannot help but have a moralizing influence on society and hopefully lower the rate of violent crime. But the less Christianity we have, I think the more propensity we have for these kind of violent crimes. But again, that never comes out of the mouth of N.T. Wright. Instead, he wants to shame Second Amendment advocates and say that you're obviously not pro-life and you're probably not even that Christian if you believe in personal gun ownership. Now, I think this is ridiculous. So let me give you the Christian case for gun ownership. And first and foremost, Christians believe that human beings are made in the image of God and that therefore they are worthy of protection. So if you have the opportunity to protect a life and you do not do it, well then how can you call yourself pro-life? Let me just put it this way. Jesus called Christians to serve, right? We're supposed to serve other people. I can't think of anything more erudite, elitist, and uptight than believing that other people should lay down their life for you. So I believe we're called to serve people, including the police. But it is not the police's job to just simply lay down their life for us and us never lay down our life for them. And I would argue that the police, their job really isn't to protect except in a roundabout way, because they are typically going to come after the fact, after the crime has happened. So who's going to protect against the crime? Well, the people who are there, hopefully, and the person or people who have the opportunity to defend themselves against a crime taking place at that moment. So unless you want to abolish the police, and that's your argument, I would say we have a moral responsibility to also protect our brothers and sisters in the blue and protect ourselves and the other people around us so that we're not just simply asking for other people to lay their life down for us and us never returning that favor for them. After all, Jesus did say, love has no greater one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. But this goes to the real hubris of the situation. And I think the thing that N.T. Wright is suffering from. We outsource our protection, we outsource our responsibilities to the federal government because we largely live in such a hedonic and humanistic society. Because we've been so spoiled, in other words, we think that we can outsource our protection to the police and that they'll always be there no matter what because society is mostly peaceful. Unfortunately, that is not always true. And you won't know that until sometimes evil comes knocking on your door. And when it does, you better be ready for it. And this is the last point I would make about it. I think Jesus teaches exactly that. In fact, Jesus, being a little vitriolic, taught in Matthew 18:6 that if you touch one of these kids, it will be very, very bad for you. So maybe there's a right to defend small children and to do whatever is necessary to make sure that they are protected. But I want to circle back to an argument because I think that this is the big thing. Most of all, what N.T. Wright is arguing takes for granted the thing that we're losing. Christian faith taught you to turn the other cheek and to love your neighbor. Atheism has no such moral code, nor can it ever justify such a moral code. But the people who want to dismantle Christian faith in the West are also the ones who want to disarm you. Weird, right?
Weird, weird.
It's best you read Scripture and come face to face with the depravity of human nature and prepare accordingly rather than trying to wish cast it away. The fact that you never once had to use a gun in your whole life is such an ignorant statement. I don't know how to address it except to say, thank God for the people who did use guns for you so that you aren't dead today. And a pro-life person cares enough about protecting life, even if he has to take one guilty life to save multiple innocent lives. But again, all of this presupposes that life has intrinsic value because it's made in God's image and it's worth protecting, which is why anyone with a Bible should be able to piece this together. I don't understand how a thoughtful Christian like N.T. Wright can struggle at something so simple. If I were to sum up what I want to say, it would be this. We are living in difficult times. And we are finding we don't have Christian thinkers equipped for those times, which is why we are outsourcing to people like Jordan Peterson and perhaps maybe even Ben Shapiro, rather than thoughtful Christian men to stand up for the issues that matter most. But rather than outsource from Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or even myself, we could go directly to the source and we can find Jesus, the creator of Christianity, tell his disciples to grab a sword. Now, does he want Peter just to flash it and show people? I mean, he didn't want Peter to use it to cut that guy's ear off. No, but maybe he did want Peter to have it to arm himself and then consult Jesus at what point in time we should be using that sword. But this is just the problem. Rather than consult the source, we have a bunch of Christian thinkers and Christian leaders who have been educated by the left-wing progressive dominated society. And instead of getting pure biblical teaching, we get a version of left-wing ideology with Christian trapping all around it. I mean, where does queer theology come from if not from there?
God is gay.
Maybe it's best that we revive the Christian faith and return to our first love so that we can actually understand what it means to be a protector of life in the womb and life outside of the womb. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and go with God.